I mean, frankly, I was confused when I first got to the US. Some people that I consider white in the context of Puerto Rico, in the context of Dominican Republic, suddenly were not. So some people kind of like cross that boundary.
Do you identify as Black? If you don't identify as Black, then you're not Afro-Latina. If you have problems identifying as Black, then that should be a red flag.
I would say to this question, it goes back to lived experience. Like, for example, when I was growing up, I didn't have the word Afro-Latina or Afro-Latino, Afro-Latinx available to me. It wasn't something that was fling around. Like, my parents are both Black Dominican people, but talking about Blackness in my household was very coded. We talked about it, but it was, it was talked about through hair or body or skin tone but the experience of mine as a Black Dominicana growing up in a predominantly Puerto Rican and non-Black Puerto Rican, particularly neighborhood, was very much an experience that I knew I was Black. So I think there are ways that that anti-Blackness also happens in lived experience, that sometimes we don't have necessarily that Afro-Latino identity or Black per se, right, at that moment, but the lived experience is always there.
Why wouldn't they?
I think Afro-Latinas can have whatever hair they want to wear because our hair struggles are real. Navigating, loving our hair, but also our body, all of it. It is quite a journey. No hair, full hair, whatever we want.
Por supuesto que todas las mujeres negras, igual que todas las mujeres, o sea, nosotras como mujeres negras podemos usar el cabello como nos dé la gana, igual que cualquier otra mujer. Pero es importante que muchas veces cuando justamente la experiencia negra es distinta, a mí me han revisado el cabello en el aeropuerto. Y estoy segura que a ninguna otra mujer le revisan el cabello, ¿no? Entonces, ¿verdad? Si tiene un cabello lacio, así que el cabello afro rizado, ensortijado, es el que parece una amenaza, ¿verdad? Así que por supuesto que podemos llevar el cabello como querramos. Y el cabello natural se ha convertido, debería ser algo bien normal, pero lamentablemente se ha convertido en un arma de defensa, en un arma para visibilizar quiénes somos como mujeres negras. Sigue siendo una forma de decirnos tú no perteneces. Entonces igual cuando he ido a un salón de belleza de mujeres africanas y no sé decir qué tipo de braids I want, se sorprenden. Eres negra y no sabes qué trenzas quieres. En Puerto Rico yo no estaba acostumbrada a hacerme trenzas. Entonces también el uso de trenzas y de los distintos peinados se convierte en una forma para nosotras visibilizar nuestra negritud y para tener estas conversaciones. Así que por supuesto que podemos usar el cabello como nos dé la gana.
Yes, it is. We could just say white Latino, because white passing doesn't completely take on the accountability and complicity that it takes that you're getting with white privilege. So like white passing is like, oh, they're just white passing. They're not actually white. So it's not holding the accountability of like, no, this person is racialized as white, right? There is a white privilege connected to that. So
I would also say it ignores kind of how colonization really happened. So I think that saying white passing subscribes to this idea that you can only be white, like if you're Anglo-white in the US. And the truth is our societies are based on racial hierarchies, white at the top. And so to suggest that Latinas, Latinxes are passing, it suggests that they cannot be white, when in fact, in all our societies, like there's an assumption of what that means, which is like having all the privileges. And we don't say Black passing. I don't pass as Black. I am Black. So similarly, you're not white passing, you're white.
It's also important to say that whiteness is also tricky. I said that I lived in Miami, and Miami is a completely different place than the rest of the country. And in Miami, white Latinos are white. Maybe in other parts of the country, we consider Latinos to be non-white, even if they are white phenotypically. So that's why I say it's tricky. But, it's really important in this discussion about Blackness, it's really important to also understand whiteness and to understand that Latinos are also white, and that comes with privilege.
There's also a blending of terms. There is race and there's ethnicity. And so some people, by using this idea, white passing Latino, want to allocating race to Latinidad when Latinidad is an ethnicity that includes different a variety of races. That's why we're Black Latinas, right? We're both race and ethnicity. And if we are, surely everyone within the Latina label, Latinx label, has a racial kind of experience, which is not to say that it's a racial identity, but a racial experience, because whiteness is rarely an identity, is more about an experience of privilege. I mean, now we're calling it out, but forever it was taken as the neutral. So if you're just Latina, there's a high probability that you have experienced life as majority or privilege, where race has not informing your experience. It's not very conscious because you've been embraced. So I think to define white Latinas are those who are considered to be the majority. And so there is a phenotypic that, right? Like lighter skin, straight hair, but that has the valued characteristics that are closer to European. But we have to acknowledge that in different contexts and in different countries, that category is wider than in other contexts. And so in the US, I mean, frankly, I was confused when I first got to the US. Some people that I consider white in the context of Puerto Rico, in the context of Dominican Republic, suddenly were not. So some people kind of like cross that boundary as they move in different places, like the mestizo like type of phenotype. But certainly in some places, they enjoy the privileges, the racial privileges, and are embraced.
I think a lot of people that watch this are going to say, well, wait a minute, you know, yes, I'm phenotypically white, but I'm also Latina, and so I experience discrimination too. I hear that a lot. And so that's not to discount that. Right? White Latinos also experience discrimination in this country, and that's also, you know, can be very regional también. But what is important is that that claim of experiencing discrimination as a white Latina or Latino does not take away from the experience or discount the experience of Black Latinas who are doubly discriminated against because of ethnicity and because of race. This
issue with the way in which we want to equate like oppressions. It's like, oh, me too. I got like somebody, like all those videos that were going around about like language, you know, which is real. I mean, I know I have that too. Like, check it off. The ways in which we're discriminated around language. And so there is xenophobia, there is ethnic discrimination, there is language discrimination, and those can be racialized. Like there's an aspect that can be associated to race, but let's not suggest that they're all the same, right? There's homophobia, like transphobia. There's all these, you know, kind of like ways of exerting discrimination that we don't have to equate that. And I hear that a lot. It's like, ay, a mí también me pasa eso, and then it discounts. It's like, no, I'll acknowledge your language discrimination. I'll acknowledge your, like the way you're, perhaps some of us are seen as being like mojados or these other like racists. I mean, they're racist, but they're discriminatory, but they're particular. So there's different kinds going around. I mean, there's a lot of work for us, for all of us to do. We have to fight all of them, but not suggest that, you know, if we address one, we take care of all of the other ones.
I think it's really interesting, right, to think about whiteness also transnationally, right, to think about whiteness globally, right, because at the end of the day, we're also still talking about white supremacy.
Most people say Black. I think it just depends on how, you know, you feel comfortable, you know, and what you prefer. But I mean, it doesn't mean anything different.
Para mí no hay diferencia entre ser afro-latina o ser una latina negra, pero el uso de la palabra tiene unas connotaciones, semánticamente hay gente que no quiere decir negro o negra porque es una ofensa. Entonces también como históricamente hemos estado utilizando las palabras, entonces quizás hay una diferencia entre decir soy afrodescendiente, que hay todo un espectro de colores, ¿verdad? Y ahí podemos hablar de colorismo. Y entonces el uso también de afro. Tengo mucha gente que dice, no, pero es que yo no soy de África. Entonces por eso no quiero utilizar afro, ¿no? Entonces de nuevo, las connotaciones que tiene negro y ese prefijo afro. Para mí es súper importante añadirle a todo lo que yo pueda el prefijo afro. Yo soy afropuertorriqueña, afrofeminista, afroboricua, afroantropóloga, si se quiere, ¿no? Es una forma también de visibilizar que siempre hemos estado. Entonces nos han querido poner en una esquina, ¿no? Yo no lo justifico, pero entiendo el contexto, porque quizás esa pregunta de cuál es la diferencia entre decir negro y soy afro, ¿no? De nuevo, también está como muy popular decir soy afrolatina y suena bonito, ¿no? Lo puede decir Amara la Negra, que es una mujer visiblemente negra, y también lo dice Cardi B. Y entonces uno se pregunta cuál es la experiencia que tiene Amara versus la experiencia que tiene Cardi, ¿no? Y ahí es donde tenemos que pensar cómo utilizamos la forma en que nos identificamos, porque muchas veces la forma en la que nos identificamos puede ser la opresión que sobrevive otra gente, ¿no?
Same. I use Afro-Latina and Black Latina interchangeably because to me, both those words, identifiers, mean that we're talking about someone who is Black, right? Undeniably Black or visibly Black. But I have made the move that in certain spaces, I want to be specific and I don't want people to misinterpret that when I say Afro-Latina, it's like a catch-all, and it's become very mainstream, this catch-all, like anybody can just take the term. So I sometimes tend to use Black Latina or Black Latinidad because I want people to know that it is political to say that Blackness is at the center of what I'm referring to and unavoidable.
I've always used Black because I use negra in Spanish. The Afro part of it is also attached to 2001 and the conference against racism in South Africa, and the world, right, coming together and saying, like, we're gonna use the preface Afro, right, and Afro-descendant to link our political struggles, our struggles across the world against racism.
Uno de los problemas que más yo enfrento cuando hablo de este tipo de temas es la invalidación. Me invalidan, me deshumanizan, tu experiencia no es importante. Entonces tenemos que escucharnos, escuchar a las demás personas y reconocer que su experiencia, si no es igual a la mía, no significa que no existe o que no es problemática o que no es importante.
I always tell my students, and it's a popular misconception, is that when we're thinking about racism, we're thinking about interpersonal racism. And I think part of learning about the Afro identity, whether it be here or anywhere else, is that you have to understand how racism works as a system, how racial inequality works as a system. And it's not about what happens, entre dos personas. It's about what is, embedded in all of our institutions, in the labor market, in the criminal justice system, in the education system. Right? All of our institutions are embedded with racism because our country was created on inequality, right? And the institution of slavery. And so we have to really educate ourselves about how racism works in order to understand why Blackness is so political.
Follow, like,